The first topic I want to address today with one of my real estate millionaires is the notion of a rich session. I want to give full credit to Justin Lahartz in the Wall Street Journal. He was quoted with this. So again, full credit to him for the nomenclature of a rich session. I want to go through this with Jonathan Twomley because I don't know that we've really experienced one. And because we haven't, we've really got to figure out that if a rich session happens, what might be the playbook, because it's the exact opposite of a typical recession. Jonathan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. So I'm really curious about what a rich session is and how it would happen. So what's the argument in this article?
So basically the talk track is a normal recession. You and I have talked about many times. It hurts the lower end of the income first, right? The service industry, all of those folks take the pain and it kind of works its way up. A rich session is actually the entire opposite. It actually works top down. I've called it a white collar recession 9 or 10 months ago when tech and finance were taking haircuts. We're still seeing that. I just posted today in the Daily Financial News an interesting stat that I had no idea about, and that is the unemployment rate is rising the fastest for households that make 125 grand or more. That is very different than a normal recession. Now, when I think about households, Jonathan, that make 125K or more, my general feeling is they have more reserves, right? So they can, hold out. We are seeing folks, and again, at a 3.6% unemployment, get jobs relatively quickly, but they are likely lower paid. But yeah, if we have a rich session that kind of starts with white collar and six-figure jobs, and AI comes in and, does whatever it does, it's going to be different. And I think the normal playbook of a recession is kind of flipped on its head, because I've studied economics for 50 years and I don't remember going through one like this before. So that's where I'll start.
Well, it's interesting. And that you're the economist, I'm the student of history, right? And I don't recall ever hearing about something that's like a rich session. I mean, obviously you have examples of past, crashes where people on Wall Street got wiped out. But it's always, those are more anecdotal stories, right? There's always like the guy who gets wiped out and jumps out a window. Like it's you hear about that stuff, but it's not really like across the board wealthy people getting wiped out and being on breadlines. It's more the people who get thrown out of work in factories, like the whole factory shuts down, right? And if like the whole firm on Wall Street shuts down, it's like, 10 people lose their jobs, right? It's not like 10,000 people lose their jobs. So, while there's certainly pain at all levels of the economy, it's not disproportionately at the top. It's usually disproportionately at the bottom, right? So we haven't really seen something before like that, if this is going to materialize at all. But I could, if this is going to happen, or if it is happening, I can kind of speculate as to a couple of reasons why it might be happening. One is, I think, we've talked about this before. Cheap money in the economy led to a lot of growth amongst startup firms that never had a shot at making any money in the first place. But because there was so much money floating around in the economy, there was a lot of funding for stuff that frankly just didn't make any sense. And I think because that funding is drying up, a lot of those firms were dependent on just, on someday we'll make money. Someday this will be profitable.
Someday we'll have product market fit. But trust us.
Trust us.
Oh, I hate that. Trust us.
But they would, and they were just getting more and more funding as they went on, which now that's dried up, right? I mean, the investors are just not willing to throw good money after bad now that money actually costs something, right? So that may be part of what we're seeing. Another part of what we're seeing, I could imagine, this is again speculation, is that to whatever extent AI is affecting the economy, it's affecting those jobs that are a little more higher level, like the jobs that involve sort of compiling data and analyzing data and stuff like that. I mean, I'm still honestly highly
Oh, I'm
duty
highly skeptical as well.
of,
I maybe
about
shouldn't have even thrown in that AI kind of statement. It's just, I just think it is so interesting to look at history and go, you know what, this time might be different, right? I think you and I know, and we've talked about the typical recession and what happens, and right, it hurts C-class properties first, and we know the playbook, right?
right.
I'm just saying, hey, this is an interesting concept I have never thought about before. Let's just play it out together. So if a recession is truly the opposite of a typical recession, to me, that means class A, the brand new pretty stuff, people might down select from. And oh, by the way, all the new supply coming online is the class A pretty stuff.
But
I don't know.
listen, but that's always been the case. See, I don't think that this is necessarily limited to a recession, right? Because
Okay.
the classic property cycle has always been, you know, you build and you build and you build and you build and you build until such
And
point
then
as
there's too much.
right, and then there's too much, right? And usually there being too much is oftentimes related to, well, the recession happens and demand kind of slows down, or whatever, or you just reach a point where there's too much. But usually it has to do with the intersection of the property cycle and the economic cycle,
Yeah.
right? So, and what gets built is class A, right? It's always
Yep.
that's always what gets built. You don't build class C, right? Class C is the
It
class A from
evolves.
40 years ago, right?
Right.
So so that's kind of always the case, and we're seeing it now in some of the cities in the Sun Belt where, and the typical real estate behavior is always the same, right? There's this extreme herd mentality that says X market has great demographics,
Yeah.
because of the great demographics, the banks love it, the investors love it, everybody piles in, it's easy to get debt, right? And meanwhile, there's other places that don't have the great demographics but have a severe housing crisis, but you can't get financing for it because the banks are afraid of that. So they all pile into the same places, and then you get overbuilt, and then a lot of those projects crash, and then the banks get scared and they won't lend anymore. And it's the cycle that just repeats itself, every 10 years or so, because everybody follows the herd and does the same thing. So it's always class A, that does that. But that's getting a little bit of far afield from this recession idea. If there was a recession, I think that would just exacerbate that trend, right? I mean, it would just because that's the market for those people, right? So
Yeah. And then the other thing I think about when I think about a recession is, I don't know if people know this, but it's pretty well known in the economic world. The top 10% have like 40% of the consumption, right? They're the ones with the discretionary income to go buy the extras of life. And if we truly have a recession, and again, a recession doesn't necessarily have to be you get laid off. It's that you are afraid that, it's around there. So you just pull back. And the one thing I think about if we stay housing related is, nobody needs $1 million home or a multi-million dollar home based on where you are. And if you're looking at that, you just put that on pause. One of the things, at least in the single family area, that is becoming painfully obvious is the luxury market is frozen. And I think that only exacerbates, and nobody wants to take out, a $500,000 or $1 million on a super luxury home when they're like, you know what, I might get laid off. I'm just going to wait. It's not that they're not going to ever. It's just, I'm going to wait. And that could really impact the market.
yeah, and I'm sure that the banks are also pulling back on those jumbo mortgages and stuff as well.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
that factor as well that's going on here. But like another thought that I had about sort of if there is a recession, you would, if it really were to happen, right? And if it were to happen in a statistically significant way, as opposed to just like we hear some rich guys are getting laid off, or like it's also like this, what is it like, what's that quote about statistics, like
Oh, yeah.
lies,
Statistics and
damn
damn
lies,
statistics. Yeah,
yeah,
damn
like
statistics.
lies, damn lies, and statistics, like
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah.
maybe unemployment over $100,000 is rising faster, but that's like it's ticking up from like 0.2% to 2.2%. So it's up by 10%, right? And like, oh
Exactly.
my God.
Exactly.
So it may not even be significant. However, let's just assume that it is.
Yeah.
You would have to, I would believe that would actually just only be the tip of the spear in a just traditional recession, right? Because as those people got laid off, as you said,
Yeah,
it would trickle down, like the
exactly what I was thinking.
spending would fall off, and then you would just wind up with the
Yeah,
same,
our
the
economy is
typical
a
pattern, right?
consumer-based economy.
Yeah.
And I get the normal recession. I've studied them for decades now. This one's just new. It's mentally intriguing because I haven't played the dominoes backwards, but you're absolutely right. If the top 10%, which again is roughly 40% of consumption, pulls back even a half, that's going to ripple down. And a great example of that is LVMH, Louis Vuitton, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
umbrella brand. They've been crushing it for 3 years straight. Their latest quarter release was a huge disappointment. The aspirational purchases pulled back significantly. So you're going to see that pull all the way down. You're going to see some trade down stuff. It could play out.
I find this hugely interesting, though, if you look at something like Louis Vuitton, right? Because I'm sure that if you look at past recessions, their results would have, at least initially, also probably fallen off a lot, right? And then you got to one, because everybody has that same, like, impulse, like, oh, I'm not going to spend. But
Mhm.
then if there was some way of like digging into the data, well, who stopped spending? Is it like their core customer who's very wealthy and doesn't matter? Did they stop spending? Or was it like the people on the edge, like on the bubble, who were
Oh,
like stretching to buy the Louis Vuitton and now they're not going to, right? For those people, you know, maybe those people shouldn't be buying Louis Vuitton in the first place,
there's
right?
probably a lot of that. Yeah, there's
You know
probably
what I
a lot
mean?
of
They're not,
yeah.
it was all
Yeah.
financed with a credit card, and
You're
like,
paying double. Yeah, exactly.
that's right. And they were, you're financing your Louis Vuitton purchase, which, to my mind seems insane. Like you're going to go
Yeah.
finance a handbag or whatever. But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it happens. But yeah, this idea is interesting. I'm going to be playing with it. I just read the article over the weekend. I knew I wanted to talk to you about this. I guess the last thing on the housing front, that again, thinking about that, that person that is rich, what they might do if they were nervous. I also think they don't buy a second home or a third home or whatever that is,
Mm,
right? The optional spend that they may not have thought twice about. I think they think twice about. The other thing I know about the rich, because I have studied the rich a little bit, is typically they can delay purchases for a couple of quarters, but they don't delay them very long.
mm.
Right? They're like, okay, I get it. I'm safe. The worst is past. I was scared about nothing. Let's go. But yeah, in the the micro, the short term, they can swing again. They're 40% of consumption. If they can impact a quarter for sure.
They may also know that a better deal is around the corner, right? And
True.
just because
True.
they're rich doesn't mean that they don't want a good deal, right?
No,
So,
you're right.
you
Very
know what I
true.
mean? And so they
Yeah,
may
yeah.
also be thinking like, hey, I'm going to wait and see, because I think that, that house that I have my eye on that's sitting there in the market, if I wait 6 months, that seller is going to be under more pressure to sell, and I can probably get a better deal.
It's
So I
true.
think that
Very true.
there's probably part of that going on. I know this is a little bit of a slightly different thing, but right now, what we're experiencing in the hotel business and with Airbnbs, I know a lot of people are experiencing this as well, is a lot of last minute bookings,
Mm.
because people are waiting for deals, right?
They're sniping. That used to be an eBay term, right? They would
Yeah,
snipe in the last couple of minutes.
they're waiting, to see if the price is going to get cut at the last minute, and they're booking last minute, because they know that, the overwhelming demand that we saw over the last few years, is, well, the demand is still there, but the supply has increased so much for Airbnbs, let's say, that, they know that the owners are under pressure, and so they don't have pricing power anymore like they did a couple of years ago. You
For
don't
sure.
have to book your vacation 6 months ahead of time, so they're waiting for those last minute deals. So I think you see a lot of that behavior going on.
Yeah, I agree. Folks, this has been a great conversation. If you have some ideas or thoughts about the Richcession, please leave a comment below. I would greatly appreciate it. I've never thought about this, and it's fun for me to kind of play the dominoes backwards. Jonathan, how can people find you?
So you can come and find me at the Apartment Investors Club, which is on Facebook, or you can go to apartmentinvestorsclub.com to get a free download and join my email list. And I'm going to announce something for the first time
Ooh, I like it.
anywhere right now. I didn't even tell you about this before. So I'm about to embark on the wholesale reconstruction and like reauthoring of my signature multifamily investment course. It's
Ooh,
been a couple of years since I updated it. I'm about to completely redo it. So I'm actually going to be kind of updating people as we go on this project over the next couple of months
I
as I
like it.
redo it. And we are going to have a really, really special deal for people who purchase the course when it's done. So the price of the course is going to go up by quite a bit because it's going to be brand new, but we're going to give you the old pricing. So stay tuned. If you're interested in this, get on my email list, go to apartmentinvestorsclub.com, get that free download and get on the list, and you'll be able to follow this live as it happens. And we've got some, some special stuff planned for you, some additional content, whatever, that we'll be putting out over the course of as I develop the course and talk about it. So stay tuned for all that.
I like it. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Mhm.